You guys, this next episode of Paradigm Profiles is called The Dark Side of Social Media. In the 1980s and 90s, the internet introduced a new form of online communication that enabled people to use digital communication through emails, bulletin board messaging, and real-time online chatting. In common and current terms, this is now known or called social media. Aside from sending emails and bulletin board messaging, some of the first forms of social media were CompuServe, you guys don't remember that, America Online, and Prodigy. These rudimentary platforms instantly attracted millions of users and even allowed email registration for the basic online user. Who remembers when they first came out with emails? Web blogs or blogs, another early form of digital social communication, began to gain popularity with the launch of the live journal publishing site. In 2002, LinkedIn, another form of social media a lot of you are probably more familiar with, was founded as another networking site for career-minded individuals. To this day, it remains the social media site for job seekers as well as human resources managers searching for qualified candidates. But social media was still evolving. In 2003, MySpace launched. In 3 years, it was the most visited site on the planet, spurred and motivated by users' ability to meet new people and share new music directly on their profile pages. But by 2008, it was eclipsed by Facebook. Up until then, I'm sure Justin Timberlake probably thought that buying MySpace for $35 million was a smart and good financial investment. Haha, bad move. It's not only been relegated to a mere afterthought, but it's one of many social media sites that ended up collapsing after a burst of initial success. I'm just giving you guys some of the history of social media since I've always been a stickler for details and giving you guys the full picture. Don't trip though. That was the boring stuff. I'm about to get warmed up in a minute. So now that I kind of went over the origins and some of the beginning forms of how social media evolved, here's a quick overview of the prominent social media networks that are in existence today. Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube are probably a few that some of you might recognize. These are all different forms of social media that offer a variety of ways to communicate, send photos, send music, and make romantic connections. But all this is just one form and one side of social media. What I want to talk about today is the dark side of social media, some of the ills, some of the detriments, and some of the fallout that social media creates for some of the content creators and their viewers alike. As a content creator for YouTube, who's been creating content for close to 4 years now, I've been in a unique position to where I've not only got to experience some of this malfeasance myself, but I've also had the opportunity to watch it play out around me. I've seen and watched it all, and I do mean it all. Everything from betrayal and backstabbing, deception, cyberbullying, cyber gangbanging, killings and robberies during live streaming, clout chasing, watching one man jock another man so hard that he can never claim a man card ever again, chasing views, airing out personal domestic baggage, swindling and preying on people's generosity, jay-catting and fruitcaking, emotional and mental breakdowns, oh, and I do mean breakdowns, drug-induced rants, coming out the closet, and then, of course, my favorite of all, how some people's ego becomes so inflated that it transforms them into self-proclaimed YouTube celebrities. This, of course, comes from some of these guys not knowing how to process a little bit of attention since they've never had it at all, and it all being foreign to them. Seriously, some people begin referring to themselves in the third sense and get all wet over being recognized in public. I'm not saying that social media is all bad, nor am I insinuating that there's not a lot of ways that we as a society can benefit from social media. In fact, I would even go as far as saying that the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. I really do mean that. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I'll do that in another episode. But for now, let's tackle this by going through some of these areas one layer at a time. Since social media sites really took off and became a phenomenon for the everyday user, for people like you and me, there's been approximately 23,642 people killed, 405,973 people robbed, and millions of people affected or impacted by some form or some type of insidious crime. I'm sure some of you have seen some of the more newsworthy killings that were reported in the mainstream media, but those are the ones that you hear about. Killings like that nut Steve Stephens, the guy in Pennsylvania who decided to go on a killing rampage after he cryptically told his mother that she would never see him alive again. He live streamed himself shooting and killing Robert Godwin, a 74-year-old grandfather who was out walking, minding his own fucking business. This fool Stephens was a cold-blooded dude. He killed this old man just so he could post a video on Facebook. Now that's somebody that really wanted some fucking views right there, man. So Abu Marwan, another nut living in South Germany, live streamed himself covered in blood after stabbing and killing his wife because he claimed that she cheated on him. Prentice Robinson was an Africano out of North Carolina who was live streaming himself when Douglas Colson walked up to him and shot him 4 times behind a love triangle that involved Colson's wife. Imagine that. Antonio Perkins was another Africano out of Chicago who was also live streaming himself when someone walked up to him in front of his family and friends and shot him 4 times. In 2017, Canadian-born Serena McKay was brutally beaten to death by 2 of her former classmates. The beating was believed to be over drugs. Selena could be overheard sobbing and saying that she was sorry while she was being assaulted. The 2 teens who were responsible for killing her then posted the video on Facebook. What's wrong with these kids, man? I'm sure everybody remembers the Philandro Castle shooting that his girlfriend live streamed during a traffic stop. The officer, Geronimo Yanez, shot him after Castle advised the officer that he was in possession of a gun. Dude got scared. He told the officer, "I got a gun." The cop freaked out and shot him. Why would you put a gun in somebody's hand like that? He ain't stable, man. Like I said, these are just some of the killings that have been talked about in the media. However, this isn't even a fraction of all the killings that have taken place since social media evolved. Getting jacked or robbed while live streaming is something else that has become prevalent on social media. You see these clips of these flamboyant dudes fanning wads of cash or fronting draped back with all kinds of gold and jewelry when someone walks up and takes their shit. I mean, come on, man. Nobody deserves to get jacked and have their stuff taken. But these guys are practically asking for it by the way they high side in these videos showing off all this money. Check this guy out. He's sitting in the back of his limo, bumping some bootsy ass rap when 2 cats walk up to him, open his doors, and clip him for his money. Then he acts dumbfounded and starts telling everyone, "Hey, I just got robbed. That was a setup." These next 2 dummies are on YouTube or Instagram counting their money and seeing who's got deeper pockets. The video finally ends when someone comes through one of their doors and pills one of them for his bread and then ultimately shoots and kills him. What these guys and others like them fail to realize is that there's people out there lurking on social media, laying in the cuts to locate and prey on guys just like these. It's not a coincidence that someone rolled up on them and clipped them for their shit. Trust me, there's people that are tech savvy who go online and watch for people that like to showboat and expose themselves like this. I learned myself that this is done through the location settings that are connected to some of these apps. If you don't go in your settings and turn off the location settings, then people know how to locate you with just a minimal amount of other information that anybody can obtain. One of the first online social media beefs to get recognized by news outlets across the country was the beef between 2 Bloods, Bosco 100 and Rosemo 700. This set a precedent for a new style of gangbanging that was called cyberbanging. It's basically taking beefs from the streets to the internet, where these guys will post an array of online disrespect. Everything from pictures, graffiti that might show one set whacking out another set, pictures of themselves pointing guns, and other disrespectful content. The beef between Bosco and Rosemo escalated after Rosemo caught Bosco on the street and had his boys record him stomping out Bosco. Rosemo then posted the video on YouTube so that the world could see it. But Rosemo also claimed he had another beef with rap artist The Game. Rosemo claimed that he knocked The Game out at the Fox Hills Mall in Culver City. A few weeks later, Rosemo 700 was gunned down in his car in what some people believe was associated with one of these beefs. Another killing that took place on an Instagram live stream was the shooting and killing of Red Boy. He was a young self-proclaimed blood that was killed for what was believed to be his association to Baby Capone, another blood who was responsible for defacing a mural that was dedicated to Nipsey Hussle's legacy. This was street justice captured on live social media for the world to see. And then of course, one of the online recent social media related deaths that should hit a lot closer to home for a lot of us is what happened to Savage Studios. No matter what you thought about the guy, and regardless of whether you liked him or not, anytime someone loses their life prematurely, it's always a tragedy, man. The motive for his killing is still being speculated, and although nobody knows for sure whether or not it was associated with social media, I'm more inclined to believe that it was. He was definitely someone who was outspoken about some of his feelings and views, and although everybody's entitled to speak their piece, at times he did it with no filter and little discretion, which didn't always sit right with others. I'm not going to get into all the other intricacies and different forms of social media crimes that I mentioned above, but one of the other things I see all the time on my channel is cyberbanging. It's the new form of gang banging. Instead of taking it to the streets and gang banging out there, they now do it from the comfort of their living rooms, safely tucked away behind a monitor and a keyboard. Most of the time, it's just some lame youngster beating his chest trying to sound tough. But every now and then, you'll get an older gang member who jumps in the comments, bumping their gums, or saying something disrespectful. Get to the crux of this profile and start digging deeper into the things that compelled me to cover this topic. How social media has turned some of the content creators into egotistical, lying, swindling, clout-chasing, self-proclaiming celebrities. It's like this, man. One of the most dangerous things that I've noticed about social media platforms like YouTube is that it allows some of these dudes the ability to become whatever it is that they want to be. Shot callers, gangsters, gang experts, Casanovas, whatever it is that they're aspiring to be. I'm serious, man. I can't emphasize this enough. And here's the thing. It's not that there's an abundance of dumb, gullible people watching. It's that they don't know better and fall for some of the rhetoric that some of these dudes put out there. I mean, let's face it, man. When someone listens to some of these guys on YouTube, including myself, they're basically at the mercy of this cat's honesty. They know absolutely nothing about these guys. Nothing about any of their history, where they've really been, what they've really done, etc., etc. So, they either believe everything they have to say, or they see right through the charades and disregard everything he has to say. The prison genre is what I'm focusing on, although I'm sure that a lot of this probably applies across the board. I've seen it happen on the East Coast as much as it happens on the West Coast. And it's not just confined to the prison genres. It's all genres in all categories. But the interesting thing that I've come to realize about the prison genre specifically is this. So you have two sides of the spectrum. Guys who talk about some of the basic going-ons in prison and who limit themselves to not crossing the line and discussing prison politics, and others who are an open bag. They have no limitations and will basically discuss anything and everything, like myself. What it all comes down to is active and not active. Guys who are active won't talk about prison politics because it's a no-no and it's against the rules. They'll get in trouble if they cross those lines, so they're very limited on what they're willing to talk about. Someone who's not active, on the other hand, will talk about it all because they're obviously no longer bound by those codes of conduct. But here's the thing about some of these cats who are not active and who begin to grow in popularity. Views and subs are the two things that create egos and a false sense of celebrity status. Once some of these cats start getting some views and their subs start going up, they start to think that they're the face of the people. Let's keep it real and put this in perspective. Doing it big with 250,000 or 500,000 subs and you're hitting anywhere close to 200,000 views, then you're doing it big and you become a reputable face within the YouTube world. Nobody can refute that because numbers don't lie. But if you're one of the minuscule channels like myself that's barely hitting 30K, 40K, 50K, 60K, 70K, and your subs fall well under 100K, you look pretty damn stupid trying to act like you're doing it big. And that's not directed at anyone in particular. So I'm just saying that ahead of time for all those of you who I know will try stirring the pot. Reality needs to slap the dog shit out of some of you people who are becoming delirious and who are losing touch with reality. But you'd be surprised how easy it is for some of these guys who are nobodies in prison, who were never part of those elite circles, and who weren't part of these movements and organizations that they talk extensively about, to still pull the wool over people's heads and play that role. These are the same guys that couldn't buy attention when they were coming up. They couldn't buy it and they were never exposed to it. But you give these same individuals a platform and an opportunity to talk themselves up, and the sky's the motherfucking limit. And it's a gradual rise in elevation. In the beginning, they'll tell you how they were delegated a position within the fold. Then that position becomes the overall position within the prison. Then that gradually bleeds out to the streets where now they become organizational figureheads and underbosses. Man, it's comical. Next, they're talking about all these acts of violence they commit behind the walls and how good their knuckle game is. How can you have committed all these acts of violence when you were on a level 1 yard or a boot camp? I said this in one of my lives the other night, but listen. Granted, you can't always judge a book by its cover, but you should be able to look at some of these cats and just know that they weren't really about the things that they talk about. They weren't really about that life. Just because someone's covered with tattoos doesn't mean they're a gangster. I've seen dudes that were all sleeved back that were some of the biggest cowards around. I'm telling you, these social media platforms create monsters, literally, man. The other thing about it is that some of these guys start lying about themselves so much that they actually begin believing their own lies and lose touch with reality. I've seen cats that went from not being active to recreating themselves into a persona who they righteously believe is a stand-up guy. They even begin second guessing themselves about whether they should really be labeled as someone who's in bad standings. Guys that have went through the debriefing process, guys that have been on SMYs, and guys who allowed themselves to operate in environments where they've actually mingled and kicked it with other people who are considered trash. Man, I've seen it all. I've seen full and complete transformations, and I'm just gonna keep it real with you guys. When I was still fairly new on YouTube myself, these things used to bother me and get under my skin. I wanted to call people out and expose the fakes. I wanted to expose people I knew were lying. But I soon learned that it was just better to let it go. Because instead of some people seeing it as pulling someone's covers and calling them on their shit, they instead started calling it hating and pushing a negative agenda. So now I just look, listen, and keep it pushing. If people are believing the hype, then hey, that's on them, man. Now here's 2 other areas that I want to touch on before I wrap this up. There's actually 3, but 2 can be killed with 1 stone. How social media platforms will take some content creators so desperate for subs and views that they'll get to a point where they'll sell out their own mother and betray anyone and everything that stands in the way. When we were still active, honesty, ethics, honor, and respect meant something to us. But I've seen every form of betrayal play out right here on YouTube. Honestly, I don't know what's worse, prison politics or YouTube politics. They're both fucked up. Speaking for myself, I can say that my viewers are the most important aspect of my channel. I acknowledge that almost in every one of my videos. I never ask for money. I don't devise 1,000 different scandalous ways to raise money and I don't prey on the kindness or generosity of those who support the channel. But not everyone can say the same, at least not with a clear conscience. The last part of this that I want to touch on is betrayal. Probably the most important part that is completely non-existent on YouTube. Sun Tzu said, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Of course, his philosophy was to keep your enemies closer so you could keep a watchful and mindful eye on them. Sun Tzu was a smart philosopher, and I'm sure he had his reasons for coming up with this. But in this day and age, with these times, I think it's probably better to keep your enemies close and your friends closer. Because I don't have to worry about my enemies when I already know where they stand. It's our so-called friends that we have to be careful of. They're the ones who will sell you out and betray you. I've seen everything from backbiting, backstabbing, playing double agents, to selling out the same people who are referred to as friends. When someone will do anything to sabotage a YouTube channel behind some views, including trolling, dropping addresses, and putting people's families in harm's way, man, there just ain't no lower you can stoop than that. It's pretty shameful and embarrassing that social media has been reduced to this, to the point where you can't trust anyone, and to see how it's caused others to completely lose touch with reality. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. We appreciate all the support, all the love, all the comments, all the positivity, all the positive feedback. This is something that we acknowledge in almost every one of our videos, because we realize that without you, the viewers, we would cease to exist.